On listening to this again, this is a couple of days later, S0604, I'm thinking that the being, in some sense, locked out from what I have in mind but can't get to, may be a very spatial way of illustrating not just the explanation that I've got here in this recording, that I'm trying to think of the right way of communicating, but more to the point, it might sound strange this, but I'm trying to make contact with God, aren't I? I'm trying to be more conscious of God. I have in mind what I want to achieve, but I'm not achieving it, or at least I'm having trouble getting to it. There's helpful people around, but, well, actually they're none the wiser than I am. So although I sort of look to them for help, other people's ideas and so on, it's not enough to, if you like, get me to where I'm going, to get me to have this greater consciousness of God and of living the godly life, if you like, living the a fullness of life, life abundant. So I know where I'm going, but I'm not sure I know of what I'm going to, in a sense. I've got the goal, but I'm not sure how to arrive at it, how to have it in my hands, so to speak. I think my present conundrum is it a if you like, the Eastern understanding of it's within, or is it more like the Western understanding, it's without in our relationship to others? You know, there's a tendency to see the extreme of the Eastern one is the Buddhist who cuts off, who doesn't even want to recognize that he's an individual entity. Person in particular, he realizes he's the focus of all causes and conditions, and suspects he is that he doesn't have an integrity of something that we could call self. Whereas the sort of Western modern view, or not too modern now, of course, because they're becoming secular, except that the secular is a view that we're a society, and that's what counts, our civilization, whereas the basically Christian view was no, we're not so much a civilization as a family, a fellowship. And to some extent that's being eclipsed by the secular view in the now well into the 21st century. We, being Western, still suspect that and to some extent lagging behind the times, still think it's family, not civilization, civil, political, if you like, political come economic. we think that's the world. It should be the family, which is, if you like, the kingdom of heaven. And the Eastern view is, no, it's the enlightenment. Isolationist approach to the renunciate, the recluse, the mystic, the guy wandering by the Ganges, so to speak. Now you could say, well, hang on, isn't the Eastern view really the Buddhist view, which is the non-self so-and-so? Not really, no. Interestingly, the Buddhist view is the monastery. The Hindu view was the ashram, which symbolizes the family home, you might have thought. And therefore you'd have said, well, that's going to be essentially Christian. You know, it's the kingdom of heaven, the family of God, the host of heaven. But no, it turns... Let me pause a sec. Well, I think the Christian thing is that we're going to make a good family, whereas the Hindu thing is that we're going to be a good isolated ascetic. You see, the Paramahansa thing is we're going to build up communities, as in the Kriyananda 9 or so across the world. Well, actually not that much across the world, but I mean essentially in the United States and one in Italy and perhaps a couple more. This notion there's the distinction between the holy life being the renunciate ascetic and the holy life being the monk in community, but the Buddhist understanding of that tends to be rather the religious order that's running the state, as in what was Tibet. The secular conception is just being a good member of the state, either obedient to the government. It's a bit like the Hebrew understanding of things, that if we get the politics right, the kingdom is a country, and it's hierarchical and obedience, and it's not relational, it's legal. It's not love and freedom, it's obedience. Now the obedience side is strong in the Guru tradition, of course. It's much less strong in the Jesus teaching thing, which is, your kingdom is a kingdom of heaven, it's not on earth. So you reject the world. I pray not for the world, you see. I pray for this family that mother hen has nestled around her. Christian thing is a divine spiritual family. The Buddhist thing is a divine individual enlightenment. Even the state of enlightenment isn't relating to each other, it's some blissful state of consciousness that's simply back in the one and only eternal being, but not individualism and relating. The Christian view is strongly individualistic, of being the right member of a family. But the Jesus view is very much different children held together by love, not law. Held by gratitude and kindness, not submission and domination, fear. This tussle between miracles being the demonstration that the holy man is holy, or the kindness of God in loving and caring for us. You know, a miracle of walking on the water is not particularly about kindness. Although you could say he's coming to the rescue of the boat that's in trouble. But the image of the healer is the social worker, a spiritual social worker, come to rescue and help the individual. As a father would rescue the children, family. My greatness is shown in loving kindness, which is really what I'm valuing, not power and the miraculous. Which is not necessarily love at all. I mean, could be, can be. Depends how it's applied. Suppose the Hindu view is a family, it's the ashram, but it's dominated by the head of the house. He's the Victorian father, really. Whereas a modernized Christian view is no, we're much more like the head of the house, with children becoming an equivalent being, and these equivalent beings have to live together as harmonious adults, not as submissive servants, staff to the one autocratic leader. I think to some extent I'm making a mistake of trying to have crisp classification on something that's much more fuzzy and similar and mixed and different in other ways and so on. They're rather in line with, well, any religion can teach you something, but none of them seem to have the full picture. Some may have it a bit better than others, but it's still a bit inadequate. It still needs what the others have got, and it hasn't got itself, or bits of it anyway. It's what's needed of the other religion. You see, the family model is very revealing. If it's not a Victorian family dominated by the head of the house, which tends to strip individuals of their freedom, and we're back to obedience, looking a bit more like a mini version of the state. A hopeful ideal of the democratic state is that people are free but cooperative in certain common values about privacy and rights and so forth. If it falls to pieces, the democracy turns into an autocracy of obedience and very little freedom. A loving family is a cooperation of not just one adult and many children, but many adults, uncles, aunts, grandparents, brothers, sisters who are now grown up and, responsible in their way as well. There's a tremendous, it's not a submission and obedience setup. And what might have been an original patriarch parent is, I won't say just another adult, but is an adult among adults, more experienced, yes, but not having a monopoly of the authority. It is democratic. So our notion of a democratic society is what is trying to mimic the adults in the family that get on with each other, as opposed to fighting for dominance. Let me just leave it there for a minute. No massive conclusion, just thank you, Dad. Could I propose for a minute that the Buddhist is got correct principles of relating to others in order to attain his enlightenment, whereas the Jesus story view is that enlightenment is our relationship with others. I mean, obviously in the Buddhist view, the others do not actually ultimately exist any more than you do. Personhood is just a misunderstanding. The individual entity. Whereas the Jesus view is that you are very much an individual entity that is eternal, unique and individual, and in a harmonious relationship. And it's the harmonious relationship that you're working on because it's a value in itself. Whereas to the Buddhist, the harmonious relationship with other Buddhists and monks and so on is in order to gain my personal enlightenment. Whereupon I will then rescue others into the same idyllic perspective. So you end up with a universe of individually enlightened people that recognize there's no such thing as personhood, and they simply are the consequence of causes and conditions. The Christian thing ends up with this cozy family of the host of heaven, of harmonious, wonderfully relating individuals. It's different, you see. The Hindus' structuring religion is not so much church and monastery. It's individual households, but they are incredibly autocratic households. And the gurus, although they recognize each other, they're not constantly meeting together to have fellowship. They're more sort of isolated individual monarchs in their ashrams, not the single host of heaven view of Christian Western view. The Hebrew view was we're concerned for the nation, not the individual. So individuals are subservient to and obedient to the nation. That's the ideal. And the head of the nation is the great autocrat called the emperor or king or god or lord. Jesus' story is struggling against that, whereas the Buddhist story was struggling against a Hinduism type, what we've called Hinduism anyway, of the importance of the individual being ultimately disclaimed, in that there's no such thing as personhood. If you're a truly enlightened being. The Hindu view is obedience to a guru, a master, and that would give you a passage through to an enlightenment that not just knows Brahma, but is Brahma. You can see where the loss of the individual comes, can't you? The transition from Hinduism to Buddhism. There's going to be this loss of, ultimately, we're all just bubbles, we're all just waves on the sea. It's really the sea that counts. There's no true individualism and so on. It's just a foolish byroad. Jesus' story loves the individual, comes to build up, rescue, and embrace into the family, not rule over. I think that's the ideal built into the Jesus story, which to some extent is in that Christian religion, but, well, it got hijacked by the state, didn't it? Wow. I know I've come away from understanding dreams, but that's far more important to me, that sort of model of the religious side of things. Yes, what I think I would term theosophia, and possibly not what theosophy is in its present form. I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Dad.